Hi, this is Karin from the Huntley Library. Welcome to today's Teen Crafternoon. Today we're going to be making felt calaveras, which are the skulls that celebrate Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. So we'll gather some supplies together and then we will get started. So I'm going to tell you about the supplies that we're going to be using for our felt calaveras. These are based on the sugar skulls that are created for Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, which are often very colorful, very fancy, very highly decorated. We're going to make ours out of felt today, just because they last longer than sugar skulls, and we won't need to make a fancy recipe. So this is an example that I made earlier. And the things you're going to need are different colors of felt. I know most skulls are white, but you can make these any color that you want to. Like I said, many of them are many different colors. So I've got some white felt here, and then I also have colored felt for different design elements. You can make the eyes and such and the nose out of different colors of felt. I also have some sequins and buttons just to use to decorate. These little flowers are actually paper, I think, and these are just called flower embellishments. So if you have something like that floating around your house, that would be a cool thing to add to your calavera as well. And then some embroidery floss. I used colors that would stand out on my little skull here. So there's blue around the outside there of the eyes and the nose. So you can use contrasting colors if you want them to stand out, or something that blends in if you want the other elements to pop out instead of the thread. These are some other examples that I found while I was researching different designs. So you can do a lot of embroidery on there if you're talented with needle and thread. Like this one has a little spider web up at the top, and they made little flowers to go around the eyes, and then they actually made little teeth too. These are paper. If you don't have felt at home and you would like to make a calavera out of colored paper or cardstock, or even just white paper and then use markers to color it in or create your designs, you can do that too. If sewing is not your thing, you can also use a glue gun or some kind of craft tacky glue to glue on all of the different pieces and elements of your skull. Here's another one. See, they used a blue skull as the background for that. And if you research Day of the Dead or sugar skulls, you can, or even coloring pages for sugar skulls, you can find all kinds of different designs to get your creative juices flowing. This looks like I used a whole strand of sequins there to make that particular design. And you can use beads as well. Somebody made like an ornament out of their little sugar skulls, and they can be as intricate or as simple as you want to make them. So I'm just going to show you what I did to create my little example there, and then you can kind of make your own thing. So from the examples that I showed you, you can see that there's a variety of ways to draw skulls. Some of them were just as simple as kind of like a circle, and then they added teeth down in this area maybe, and then eyes, and then a nose. And you can make them longer and narrower if you want to. I think sort of a light bulb shape works well for a skull. You can also look at different images of skulls and see what appeals to you. But the one that I went with was this sort of light bulb shape up here. And if you're doing this on paper, then you can just cut that shape out. Or you can cut your paper shape out and then trace it onto felt so you can make a pattern. And you're going to need 2 of these. If you're making a stuffed skull, you're also going to want to have some stuffing on hand. If you're just making like one single layer of felt, then you just need to cut out 1 piece. Otherwise, cut out 2 pieces so that you can stuff them. So since I already have a white skull that I made, I'm going to use this red here because I already have 2 pretty decent sized pieces that I can use to make my skull. And I am going to use a marker to draw my skull shape on here based on my sketch up here. I want it to be, like I said, kind of a light bulb sort of shape. And this doesn't have to be perfect, because once I'm cutting I can make it line up better. And if you make some mistakes on there with a marker, you can always just use the other side of the felt and put them together so that those marks don't show up when you're sewing. Oops. If you're using felt and or paper, you are going to need some scissors to cut out your skulls. So that's what I'm doing now. These are just regular paper scissors that I'm using, but depending on the sharpness of your scissors, you might want to use fabric scissors when cutting the felt pieces. If you're cutting paper, of course, use paper scissors. Okay, and some parts of this are a little pointy, so trim those off. If your felt is moving all over the place while you're cutting it and isn't behaving for you, you can use some pins to hold all the pieces together. Just pin it together. And I'm going to turn my other sides, or put those sides that I drew on together so that I don't see the marker when I sew this up. Okay, and then you just want to make sure that you have two pieces that are the same. So I'm trimming off a few more edges here where they didn't line up precisely. Because I'm letting the stitching on mine show, it is more important to have these edges line up. If we were sewing around and then turning it inside out, which is something you can also do before you stuff it, you wouldn't have to worry about the stitches showing, but you can see on my example I'm just going to stitch around the outside like that. All right, so we've got our basic skull base here, and now we can decide how we want to decorate that. So let's get out some other colors and make some very important decisions. So I'm going to use this green and light blue felt to make some eyes, and I want them to be sort of flowery, so I'm going to try and make some petals. So first I'll just cut out some circles, and then we'll try and get the petals created from those. You can always draw or sketch your shapes out onto your felt or your paper before you cut it. I'm just hoping that I can get this circular enough without having to resort to that. Save me one step in the process. Okay, and then you can put those down and see how they look on your skull. These are kind of big, so I'm going to trim off a little bit more so they're not quite as large. Here we go. We're getting there slowly but surely. Don't feel like you have to make a huge cut right at the beginning. You can keep trimming off as you need to make them fit better. Okay. My blue one is a little bit misshapen for some reason. It must have moved around while I was cutting. So I'll cut off a few more pieces of that one. Okay. So I don't know if my scissors are going to be sharp enough to make some petals. All right, I'm not super confident about my ability to cut petals freehand, so I am going to draw my petals. If I can find my marker. There we go. Here we are drawing some petals. And this can just be a starting point for your petals. Actually, I'm not going to do it on the fabric there in case my marker comes off onto it. Since I've already gone to the trouble of turning it inside out so that I don't see the marker from my tracing of the skull. Okay, so I've got some sort of petals drawn on those. And now I'm just gonna trim them up. And you might find that your scissors, which may have worked before for the larger piece that you're cutting, are not as good cutting these more involved smaller pieces. We'll see how it goes. I'm getting some of those cuts out. I'm more like cutting the pieces out that I that I don't want than cutting around the petals themselves. Whatever works for you. One doesn't want to come out. Okay, I think I've got one little part left here. Last one. You can do it on this piece. And my scissors definitely want to, they're sharper up further on the scissors, so it's harder to cut. Okay, so here's my one petal. It's looking a little fuzzy, so I might have to clean that up before I actually sew this on. I like to lay out all the pieces that I'm going to be using first, just to see how it's all going to look, and then we'll sew them on. So that's one eye. I'm going to cut out the petals on this one, and then I will come back to you and show you what that looks like. Okay, here are my two flowers that are going to be the background of my eyes. And I think I'm going to do black centers. So I'm just going to cut a couple of circles out of this black felt for the center of my eyes. Whoa. You can tell that those are not completely circular, so I'll trim a little bit more, hopefully not too much. Slowly but surely. All right. So what does that look like? Not bad. So my sugar skull needs a nose, which is kind of like an upside down heart, as you can see from my example. So I'm just going to fold a little heart out of this dark blue felt and cut that out. This is my, you might know this trick already. For making hearts, you make a fold down the middle of where you want your heart to be, and then you can just cut out half a heart shape, and then you will have a whole heart that has matching sides when you're done, theoretically. So, whoops. Then it stuck to me. Alright, so this one is going to have kind of a bigger nose. I saw a sugar skull on here that had a nice little mustache, so I think I'm going to make a little mustache for my skull too. Or maybe I could do some teeth like that or something. How big my scraps are sometimes gives me ideas and possibilities. I think that might be the only little black scrap that I have left. Alright, so I have to do something with this to make a mustache. So this part right here could make a mustache. Let's see what we can do with that. Don't want this on the top, so I'll try and trim that out. Yeah, really, if your scissors are as dull as mine are right now, I recommend switching to something sharper. I'm going to trim out this bottom part too. I want a more rounded mustache, although this would definitely make kind of a cool, weird cubic mustache. If you're into mustache scaping. Alright, that's closer to what I want. To make it line up or be more even on both sides, I'm going to fold it in the middle here, like so, and then trim around the edges. And hopefully this will make it look fantastic. You can't do this with an actual mustache on your face. Alright, let's see what it looks like now. Unfolding it. Perfect. Okay. And I went through my bag of buttons here and found a couple of these silver buttons to use as eyes. I feel like it needs more color or more something. Maybe something up around the skull there, or I could do some sequins along the sides of the eyes later. I'm not going to pick out the sequins now. I'm going to start sewing these pieces on to my skull. So you can temporarily set aside the second piece of your skull, which we'll sew on later. We're going to sew these pieces on to our Calavera first, and then attach it to the front side to the back side and stuff it. This will be easier, and we can hide all of the knots from our embroidery floss on the back of this. I kind of wish I had some yellow felt, because I feel like yellow behind the eyes would be very eye-catching, eye-popping, all of those things. Next time, next skull. Since I don't have yellow felt, I do have yellow embroidery floss, so I'm going to use some of that to do my sewing, and that will definitely stand out as a contrasting color to some of the darker colors that I have on my sugar skull. When measuring out your floss or your thread, I would not go more. I usually use about 2 feet of it, depending on how much sewing I have to do. That's a manageable amount for me to have on my needle and not get all tangled up. And embroidery floss is usually 6-stranded, and I like to use 3 strands. So I separate the piece that I cut so that I only have 3 strands that I'm working with. and you can do that too, or you can use all 6 if you want to, or just 2 strings. It is up to you and your preferences. Just make sure that you smooth out any knots or tangles before you get started. So that's one piece I have off to the side. And now I have extra thread to work with too if I need more to finish my sewing part. Okay, thread your needle, get that thread right through the eye of it right there, like so. If you are prone to pulling your thread right through that eye all the time, you can pull these 2 ends down together and tie a knot at the end of both of them, and then your needle will be securely locked into place and you won't have to worry about losing your thread. That will use more floss, so I'm going to conserve floss and just tie a knot at one end of this and leave the other end loose. So I will potentially unthread my needle along the way. So I like to tie, depending on the fabric that I'm using and how like porous it is. I guess it's not really porous, but how much space there is between the fibers. I like to tie a knot that will be big enough not to get pulled through those fibers. So in this case, I've gone around I think I did four little knots on there. And then the first thing I'm going to do is sew on the flower parts of the eyes. So I'll put my other pieces aside here. And then you can pin these into place if you want to make sure you don't move them around. And I'm going to come up to the right side of the face here, and then my knot should lock securely in the back. And then just sew around with this is called a running stitch, where you're just coming up through the fabric. Let's see if it will focus on that. Yeah, up through the fabric. Ooh. It's hard to watch this in the video and do it at the same time. And then make a little, go down through the fabric to make a little stitch, and just go all the way around the flower. If the petals are too much for you, you could always just sew a circle around the middle and then leave the petals kind of flopping up. I am going to sew my petals down. And sometimes the thread will, or the floss will knot in the back, so you want to watch out for that and pull any knots out. So I'll show you what this looks like once I've got it all sewn down. Okay, here's what my first little flower eye looks like. Some of these stitches are kind of wild. So I am on the last one here, and I just need to tie a knot on the back to tie that off and keep it from coming undone. So again, I'm going to tie 3 or 4 little knots there so that that doesn't come loose. 3 and 4. I like to hold my nail or my thumb right on top of that so that it just ties right on top of itself. And then you can clip the remainder off and get ready to sew your next piece on. And for me, that's going to be this little flower here. So I'm going to sew that on, and then I will check in with you again. Again, you'll need to put another knot in your thread before you get started. Okay, so now we've got the green side on as well. So our next step is to sew these little black pieces on. So I'm going to do that. I actually ran out of my first piece of yellow thread. I think I'm going to sew the black ones on with an orange thread. So I will show you what that looks like when it's all done. Alright, Now it's really looking back at us. So those are the black pieces sewn on. And here's what the back looks like. See my many knots? Alright, so next up is to put on the silver eyeballs. I switched back to my yellow thread now. Here's my second piece of the yellow. And my buttons have 4 little holes in them. So that's what I'm going to sew through. These actually, you can put them on in different ways. This side has like a little sort of black center around it, black ring around it. And this side is all silver. So I'm just going to look at that and see which way I like them. Do I like the black up or this completely silver? I think I like it with the little black ring, so that's how I'm going to sew them on. And to sew the buttons on, I just hold the button with my thumb, the one that I'm not sewing with, and then I come up from behind, underneath, through one of the holes. There, I got one. And then I've got a knot in my thread. And then I just want to make sure that this button is where I want it to be. Pretty much centered on the black there. And then I'm going to come down through this hole over here. Oops, this one here, right next to the other one. Once again, holding it with my thumb so it doesn't move around too much. And then I'm going to come up through one of the holes that I haven't come through yet, assuming I can find it. Oops. This is where you might want a thimble for to protect your finger. There you go. Coming up through one hole there. And then the other hole that I haven't sewn through yet. Okay, and then you can then go around to the next hole and then just attach them the other way. So come up through. The hard part is finding the holes, right? Okay, so I found another hole. So I'm coming up through that one, and then I'm going to go through the hole that I didn't go through last time with that one. So this one is actually right across this way. Okay, and then same thing. Oops. These other holes. And this is the hole that I didn't come through on that side. That should be good enough to hold it on. We're not actually using this as a button, so it won't button into anything, so it's not going to get a lot of twisting action. If you're concerned that yours is not going to stay on, you can go around through the holes a few more times just to really secure it. But I'm going to just tie a knot on the back here and then do the other side. Here's my knot. 2 and 3, and now we're moving on. Okay, so my eyes are pretty much finished here, and now I want to attach my nose. So I'm just going to sew that on the same way that I sewed the little petal pieces on, with a running stitch all around that outside edge. Okay, nose is on, so now we're going to do the same thing to attach the mustache. These last, like the mustache hangs the edge of the skull a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to sew on the inside of that, and it can stick up a little bit on the edge, much as a real mustache would. Alright, our mustache is on, and now I just have some sequins that I think I want to add to my skull. And you can put the sequins on singles, or you can double or even triple them up. So just kind of play around and see where you would like to have those if you're using sequins or other doodads on your skull. So I think I'm going to put them on singly in whatever way strikes my fancy as I sew them on. So I'm going to show you how to sew one on, and then you can decide where you want to put them. Okay, so I'm going to sew one on right there, and there's a little hole in the sequin, you can see. So I'm going to come up through that hole, and I do have a knot at the end of my thread here. And then we're going to make a French knot, which if you take the thread in your hand that's holding the felt fabric, you're going to take your needle and then wrap the thread around a couple of times. If your thread is very thin and you think it's going to come through this hole, once you tie this knot, then wrap it around more than twice. You could do 3 times. I'm doing it 3 times here just to show you. And then you're going to pull that down on the needle a little bit so that you have enough needle to get back through that hole. And keep this kind of tight in your fingers and push your needle down through all that wrapping that you did. Might be difficult to get all the thread through the eye through that little hole in the sequin. But do your best and then pull it tight. And then you should have a little knot. There we go, a little knot right in the center there, and that's your French knot. So I went around 3 times to get that size knot. Like I said, if you're using more strands of the floss and it's thicker, you might only need to go around a couple of times. So do that for all of the other sequins that you want to add on there. And then we will meet back up and see what they look like. Oh, I forgot to mention, you are going to want to flip this over after you've done the knot on that side and tie another knot on the back just to secure that. All right. Flip, knot, clip, and do the next one. Okay. Here's what my little felt calavera looks like with all of its sequins sewn on. And I got started on sewing around the 2 pieces of felt together. When I started this off, I had a little knot in the end of my thread, and I sewed up just through the top piece so that the knot would be hidden on the inside, and then my next stitch I sewed into both pieces and then did my running stitch all around. If you are finished with the running stitch and would like to do another stitch, a whip stitch or a blanket stitch along the edging looks nice, so you can try one of those. I started right up here to leave the chin open so that if I want to add stuffing, I can put it in here and then I can finish sewing around to the other end here. So you will probably need like less than a handful of stuffing. And I'm out of the polyfill, so I am just using a Kleenex to stuff mine. Some kind of tissue. And I might need 1 more of those. This should work fine provided it doesn't need to get wet for any reason. And what are you going to do with this after you finish it? You can make an ornament like one of those examples I showed you. You can stick a magnet on the back of this. You could put a little clip on it, like sew a little metal clip, and then use it as like a backpack charm or something like that. So lots of possibilities. Okay, that's stuffed plump enough for me. So now that the stuffing is in, I can finish sewing around the outside edge here, and I'll just continue with my running stitch. If your other stitches were kind of big and far apart, you might want to do the stitch that closes this off closer together, smaller stitches, just so your stuffing doesn't escape in the end. So while I do this, I'm going to pause the video for a second, and then I'll show you my knotting when I tie it off in the end. Okay, so I'm back with my very last stitch, and I'm going to try and conceal the knot just a little bit. So I'm going to come down through this top part into sort of the between area between the front and the back pieces of fabric, and then I'll just pull up there, and then I'm going to tie a knot right in that space and cut it pretty close to the fabric, assuming I can tie a knot. Alright, so one knot, two knots, last one, I think. And since the mustache does overlap on the side there a little bit, hopefully that will also help hide my knot. Okay, pretty small. Can't really see it from this side. That's good. Alright, and we are all done. Congratulations, you have made a felt calavera. I hope you had fun making felt skulls with me today, the Calaveras, and that yours turned out pretty cool. I am really happy with how mine turned out. So, whoops. Can we get them both facing the same direction at the same time? There we go. Awesome. So like I said, you could put magnets or some kind of way to hang them on these, and then you can use them as ornaments or decorations. They're pretty neat. For more fun ideas, please check out our website, www.huntleylibrary.org, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more of these videos. See you next time. Bye-bye.